This is the very first time we've tried it where we have multiple speakers and they're all in vastly different locations, including, I think, Jay's outside of the country. We're going to have Todd Duncan, Jay Mesinger, and Jed Donaldson are going to be on. And I'll let them introduce themselves as they come on, but we're going to start with this little bit of a YouTube video about who my company is and what we do. While you're on this thing, you're on live chat. If you want to send questions in to any of the speakers or to all of them in general, please do so. We'll pass them on to the speakers. So here we go. Tax professionals a couple of decades ago. At that point, most people who were buying airplanes hired an aviation attorney who billed them $600 to $1,000 an hour, and I realized I could deliver the work faster with a guarantee, and I charge less. And so we did that, and in infinitesimally small amount of time, we're the biggest company that there is that does this. We've done over 1,400 cases. We've never failed even one. And at any time, we're monitoring between 100 and 150 active audits with the state of California. That's who we are.
As the Executive Director of Aero Marine Tax Professionals, the staff here is 100% client focused. We want 100% satisfaction from all of our clients. We are available 24/7 for them. Our ultimate goal is to get their exemption and have them so happy that they're referring us to other people that they know. So if you are interested in becoming a part of our team, give me a call. Their mission is to make sure that we have a happy client.
The reason that we're doing this is because there's a gap between the knowledge of how to do things, whether it's law, whether it's procedural, whether it's maintenance, that it actually is all available, just that most people don't know where to get it. So I'm trying, our organization, I want to become the hub so that the entire industry can get all of its resources through me. That is my ultimate goal for doing all this, because it's important for them to for us to make it easy for them to get the information that they need. So that's the reason why I'm kicking up everything that we're doing, from the YouTube videos to the articles that I write, to the things that are going on with my website, to all of the stuff, is because it's vital. It's extremely vital that they have good information from a trusted source. I'm not someone who's trying to sell them an airplane. I'm trying to assist the sales process in the aviation market. When I first started this business, I did a complete market survey with a very large marketing firm. The number one button in this industry is saving money. We've got this information from you guys, okay? And that is what we do, and we're very successful at it. We've done over 1,400 cases and never failed one. At any given moment, we are monitoring between 100 and 150 audits with the state of California. So join us, become part of our family, and you can be part of our winning success rate. We'd love to help you. A quick little sales pitch. There's Todd Duncan on the video. Jay is still on audio. And Todd, take it away with today's presentation. But the first question I have for you guys is, what is bringing this issue up? What is the reason or the foundation for the reason that this subject needs to be approached? Take it away, Todd.
Well, Tom, this is Jay Mesinger, and I thought I would kick this off. For me, I'm an aircraft broker. I own a firm called Mesinger Jet Sales. We've been doing this 44 years in an industry, by the way, that by and large is wonderful, with wonderful people who care about what they do with passion every day and get up to do it with best practices. As I say in the past, I would never bring my family into a business or into an industry that really wasn't well attended by a universe of really great people. But it doesn't take many who can veer off course to change the tone and text of the perception of our industry for those other participants. And what I started in this was, of course, there are no policing bodies. There never will be this ethical business transaction statement that was built by and endorsed by NBAA, is not a policing organization. So it's going to be about awareness. And this is a tremendous first step that Jed at the AMC committee at NBAA and Todd Duncan at the AMAC and the board level of NBAA have started to put together and endorse. And we appreciate this opportunity today for Jed and for Todd to talk about this and have questions and help again create a broader awareness of some of the best practices by a few. And what it is, and by the way, it doesn't just exist in the aircraft transaction world, as Todd will share with you. So, gentlemen, please. Next.
Thank you, Jay.
Jed, you want to kick it off?
Go ahead, Jed.
Go ahead, Todd.
Well, then I'll do a quick introduction of myself and why I believe this is important and timely. Todd Duncan, Duncan Aviation. We are in the maintenance, repair, and overhaul business for business aviation aircraft, primarily in our Michigan, Battle Creek, Michigan facility and Lincoln, Nebraska facility, where we have about 2,000 team members doing paint, interior, and modifications work on strictly the business aviation segment. I also have about 150 technicians out in the field in the busy business airports all over the United States, serving corporate clients at those busy airports throughout the U.S. You know, I'm also very fortunate to have represented here or I will represent over the next couple of years many of our industry colleagues that make up the Associate Member Advisory Council to NBAA. And those associate members are small companies, medium-sized companies like Duncan's, but also very large providers to the operating community, the business aviation operating community out there. We have been in this business now for over 60 years, and we have always done it with a very long-term view in our mind with our people and our customers. I think it's of a particular interest and timely that our industry has been going through some very tough economic forces many years, especially the manufacturers. And so it has highlighted this perspective, this issue of ethics within our segment, within our business aviation segment. So really pleased to represent NBAA and our AMAC members today, informally, as well as representing maintenance and repair in the industry. So thanks for attending today.
Well, Todd, thank you. Can you hear me, Todd?
Yep, you're coming through loud and clear.
All right, everybody, Jed Donaldson here. Currently, thank you, Todd and Jay, and appreciate everybody coming today to be on this webinar. I serve as the chair for the Business Aviation Management Committee under the National Business Aviation Association, as everybody can see here. My full-time duties are as the Director of Aviation at the Harley-Davidson Motor Company out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I have been with the Business Aviation Management Committee for 10 plus years now or so. As the chair, I was tasked with developing a tool for best practices for the industry and the association membership. And what we're going to talk about today is a little bit of that work that we've been doing. It came to us through membership that there was an issue. We did a little research, realized our entire industry really didn't have anything, a good statement out there, and through the work of a lot of different people, we were able to develop this statement. So if it's okay with everybody, I'm just going to start in with the presentation. If there's anybody that wants to jump in, let me know. So the question becomes, where in the industry do we see the poor practices taking place? And we're going to go through and hit a couple of things here before we dig in. There wasn't any segment of the entire industry that we didn't find a problem. I could spend 2 or 3 hours talking to you about all the different issues that we saw and have heard about. They range from people taking personal money back for engines that are being overhauled or hot sections being done, as vendors will send back actual money to directors of aviation getting very large gifts for sending aircraft work out at some facilities, to management companies that are asking brokers to basically kick them a commission on the backside of selling the aircraft for their customer as part of defraying the cost of the management contract on the front end. We saw it literally in every different facet of the industry. So in a sense, a lot of what we saw precipitated what was happening. And I think to Jay's point on some earlier blog posts, we noticed that the economic climate today has led to people trying to find different ways to carve up money and to be able to find different ways to make and to get new customers and to keep their customers. And there may be some people that have thought about doing this and are doing this in a way that maybe isn't quite as ethical or transparent in the transaction process. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the ethics statement and where it came from. I'll give you a little more context on that, how the statement works, what it is and what it isn't, what NBAA is doing with the statement, who should use it, and then we're going to review some highlights of the statement, which can be found on the NBAA website. So why did we build it? One of the biggest reasons was we actually found that we just didn't have one. We didn't have any good guidance. The association hadn't put any guidance out there or hadn't developed it. Certainly the association does have internal guidance, as we all do in our corporations. Most all the companies have some sort of code ethics. NBAA does for its employees, but we didn't have anything for the association membership. So we wanted to be able to offer some guidance for our member companies on how to conduct business. We also, and this is a critical part of it, we believe that if we didn't bring this to the attention of the association, that it could actually hurt our entire industry. And that eventually what was going to happen was there was going to be somebody hurt in a transaction that was less than transparent, and they were going to bring to light that potentially this is how our industry actually operates, and it could become very dramatic for all of us and would cast a dark shadow on an industry that really is quintessentially American and is an outstanding part of what makes all of us very proud and passionate about being in the industry we're in. So industry protection was a big part of it. We took a different tact. To Todd's point, we did not want, there's a couple of requirements we had to have on how to adopt it. We needed to be very careful that we did not put the association into a police state against its own membership. And to that point, any association, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. We hope that we get OEM adoption and also obviously MRO adoption, or at least get them to support it. So again, how does it work, what it is and what it isn't?
Jed,
first and foremost, it is not a code.
Can I interrupt you for a second? I need to remind everyone,
Absolutely.
all the presenters, that there's some feedback coming, so please turn your audio off if you're not speaking. The only one who should have his audio on is Jed. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. So what it is and what it is not, first and foremost, it's a transactional ethics statement. There's a reason why it says it's a transactional ethics statement, and it comes from a strong legal position. We did not get this created in a vacuum. We developed it with the help of several legal teams, and then took it beyond that to some webinars with some different industry legal advice that was given to us in terms of maybe how to structure it. So it's not a code of conduct. As a member of the NBAA, you are not required to read it. You're not required to sign off on it. We don't do that. But we are building it. We do have it out there as a tool for best practices on how we believe transactions should be conducted. It's important to note that it doesn't put the association into an enforcement state. I said that already, but I can't reiterate that enough. And it will provide and does provide for best practices on how best to conduct business in our industry. It ultimately will be a tool through our management guide, which is why I was tasked with this, because the Business Aviation Management Committee is the caretaker and keeper of the management guide. And our goal is to build a lot of context of right turns and wrong turns in all facets of the industry and add those as a appendix to the management guide. If you're not familiar with it, it's a good thing to look at, especially in a lot of the work that we've done in harmonizing the management guide to also ISBAO practices. So we've taken the NBAA management guide, harmonized it with ISBAO, and now we're adding an entire appendix that's going to deal with this whole ethics issue. So the statement in itself, since NBAA has created it, sets forth a foundation for ethics across the industry. If you read the full 2-page ethics statement, what we hope you can gain from it is that it's written in very plain language that anybody can understand. That you don't, it's basically the cornerstone of what we want to develop for the tools that are going to go in underneath it in the management guide. The ethics statement itself, though, if you just read the 2 pages, makes a lot of sense. And we're going to get to some excerpts on that and kind of read it out as to some pieces of it that are in there that you'll see very quickly are pretty straightforward. Certainly the NBA and its committees will begin to develop a lot of the content that I've talked about and create a lot of the tools. Now, maybe the question comes up, you know, well, how does that really going to work? Well, if you understand the substructure of the association, there's international operations, and there's flight attendants, and there's maintenance committee, and there's domestic operations. I mean, there's multiple different subcommittees. In fact, one of the subcommittees under my committee is actually unmanned aerial systems. And we found early on and quickly that when we brought up this whole ethics discussion, the UAS piece of it also wanted their own section to be able to be ethical standards, and it was interesting. What they were concerned about, of course, would not be the same as maybe a maintenance organization like Todd's, or the sales organization like Jay's, or the flight operations maybe for me. But what they're concerned about is who has ethical control over the data that the UASs are bringing in. What happens if a UAS violates FAR 107? Is there ethical violations on what they're looking at and what they're seeing? So they want to be able to add some context. My point is it's very broad, and we're hoping to be broad within the management tools guide, the management guide, to be able to give some good context across all the different platforms. So when we built this, we spent several months designing this 2-page document, and then spent another month and a half doing webinars with industry people, and we tried to cover a vast group of the entire industry. That being said, we spoke to one webinar on that had brokers in it, one webinar with legal firms in it, a webinar with all the OEMs. We actually had all of the OEMs, well, almost all the OEMs. I was missing, I think, 1 or 2 OEMs at the table on that webinar, but this was top leadership of those OEMs were on a webinar that we discussed this whole issue. And we basically said to everybody, you know, our goal is, because it's a tool and because it's a statement, what we hope is that you'll see value in it enough to put it out there in front of your customers and say, look, this is how we plan to conduct our transactions in a very open and transparent way. And so we went into this on adopting it, or having, not so much adopting, but having other associations begin to see that there was value in it. And then we took it, the last one I did was for NARA, NATA, and Gamma. And we're already seeing that, well, let me at least say this. NBAA did not create this ethics statement for all associations. They created it for their association. They would not presume, NBA does not presume to try to force another association to follow something they're creating. It's important to note that. However, in that same light, what they did want to do was make it available to all associations. So what we did is we took the statement that was created for the NBAA membership, because most of us have overlapping members, and we open sourced the document, meaning we're allowing any association to take this document, craft it and modify it for their specific association, and use it as they see fit for their membership as well. Which hopefully what we're going to find across the entire industry is that the context of the statement begins to look very similar across all the associations. And that being said, we have had a lot of support by the other sister associations in our industry to also use this statement as part of their product offering to their constituents as well. And quite frankly, may be able to build their own best practices within their association that is very specific to their members. So we're going to get to a point here where we can finally talk about the little bit of the context. There's essentially 6 parts to the 2 pages. An introduction that goes on for several paragraphs, and then we talk about honest and ethical conduct. We talk about conflict of interest, company funds and other assets, business report or business records, and then obviously state, federal, and international compliance laws. Again, this 2-page document is not designed to give you all specific context. It's designed to give you a cornerstone by which you're able to by which we're able to build off of and put some very specific guidance in the management guide and use it as a tools for best practices across the entire industry. I mean, we hope to do educational, NBAA hopes to educate the rest of the association in some very specific ways that we would then add to the management guide. But these are the core components of the 2-page document. A part of the statement we make in there, and it's worth a read, is, and this we kind of formulated as interesting, but we basically ask you the question. A good rule of thumb is to ask yourself this: how would my actions appear on the front page of a national newspaper? Would your actions appear honest, professional, and ethical, or could such exposure cast a negative light on your reputation and that of your company and the industry? Again, very plain language. We're not trying to pontificate and make something way more than it is. We're just asking that question. We go on to talk about honest and ethical conduct. And I would say, and again, I'll read with you, all business aviation professionals must always conduct him or herself in an honest and ethical manner. Everyone must consistently adhere to the highest standards of personal and professional integrity and not tolerate any attempts to deceive or evade responsibility for actions. Business aviation professionals must maintain confidentiality by avoiding inappropriate disclosure of information. And there's been a little bit of a mix-up on this, I think, and maybe a little misread. They hear the word inappropriate disclosure of information. When we talk about full disclosure, we do not talk about it from a standpoint of believing that people outside of a party to a transaction should have to disclose information. But what we do believe is that if you're in a transaction, all parties should be should know about all that's going on within that transaction. So disclosure of information isn't broadly used outside of the transaction. It's only for inside the transaction. Let's give a case in point. I had an OEM come to me on a $50 million deal. It was for an aircraft, and this is kind of gives you an example of it. They had gotten a lead to a customer for a $50 million aircraft, and the lead had set it up to the point where the transaction had gotten basically down to almost to the closing. It was the day before the closing. The $50 million transaction was precipitated certainly by a lead, and paying a finder's fee is not uncommon in the industry. But here's how it got interesting. The individual that brought the lead then turned around and told the OEM, you get to pay me in cash. I want $50,000 for my finder's fee, and I don't want it disclosed on the transaction to the customer. So the customer's buying a $50 million asset from the OEM. The third party who made the introduction is saying they want paid under the table or off to the side of the transaction, and the customer would not be aware of that. The OEM said, no, it's not our policy to do that. It is our policy to pay you the commission. Again, open and honest, ethical. We will have to put it as part of the closing documents for the sale of the aircraft. And the individual said, no, you're not going to do that because I don't want that to happen. And when all was said and done and the dust settled, the transaction got pulled off the table by the third party and taken to a different OEM where it was completed. And the first OEM, the original OEM that was brought to the table, lost the $50 million deal. Again, confidentiality and appropriate and inappropriate disclosure, you get both of those statements. You understand the big picture. And here's where the conflict of interest can occur. We talk a little bit about that for everybody. Private interest interferes in any way or even appears to interfere with that of the company the professional is representing. A conflict situation can also arise when one takes actions or has interests that may make it difficult to perform his or her own work objectively and effectively. It's reasonable for companies to expect business aviation professionals representing them will perform their duties conscientiously, honestly, and in the best interests of the company. Such professionals must not use their position or any knowledge gained as a result of their position for private or personal advantage. I think that's pretty straightforward. We talk about company funds and other assets because almost all of us that are in the industry, especially on the consumer side, are dealing with large amounts of company funds. Those of us that have responsibility for or access to company funds in any form must follow the prescribed procedures for recording, handling, and protecting money as detailed in company policies. Companies impose strict to prevent fraud and dishonesty. If a business aviation professional becomes aware of any evidence of fraud and dishonesty, he or she should report the information to a supervisor or follow the company's whistleblower procedures. When a business aviation professional's position requires spending company funds or incurring any reimbursable expenses, that individual must use good judgment on the company's behalf to ensure that good value is received for every expenditure. A company's funds and other company assets are to be used only for that company's purposes. Also important to note here, we are not assuming as the association that we are superseding a company's ethical code of conduct. What we want this to be is a snap-on into the transaction process of the aviation department's access to the industry, not to supersede a company's own ethical standard. And that's also one of the requirements we had when we were designing this. This becomes fairly straightforward. Business records have an obligation to maintain complete and accurate business and financial records. Detail of all transactions must appropriately be documented in the proper period, accurate and generally accepted accounting principles. Documents must be retained and destroyed in accordance with company's retention policy. When we talk about compliance with state and federal laws, we had to put this part into it, and the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Business aviation professionals must be mindful of the numerous professional ethics rules for lawyers and accountants, state and federal laws and regulations that may apply in an individual's or company's activities. For example, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act prohibits giving anything of value directly or indirectly to officials of foreign governments or foreign political candidates in order to obtain or retain business. Similar laws have been adopted by other countries. Business aviation professionals must avoid making illegal payments to government officials of any country. In addition, many governments have laws and regulations regarding business gratuities that may be accepted by their personnel. And again, I'd encourage everybody to look at the statement. I believe it's posted on the NBAA website just to fully understand the whole thing. Further, commercial bribery, where there's no government officials involved, is a criminal offense under certain state and federal laws. Business aviation professionals must familiarize themselves with applicable rules. Violations of these laws can result in sanctions against both individuals at the company. And this is where the National Business Aviation Association affirms the business aviation industry's commitment to ethical behavior and will continue to be a leader in this effort, which led to us signing this document. We did it at the board meeting in December. It was signed by myself as the committee chair, our chairman of the board, Fig Newton, and our CEO, Ed Bolin. And now I yield to Todd and Jay if they would like to add context to a little bit of this. I'll let you folks speak.
You know, I'd like to invite Todd to speak from, he spoke a minute in his introduction from an AMAC role. It'd be interesting to hear how you, from an MRO role, Todd, feel about the need for the practices and what you're seeing since this has been put into place.
Yeah, thanks. I think there are all kinds of reasons that this is healthy for our industry, for business practices, for those that are already established users of business aircraft and those that are considering using the business aviation tool. And I do bring, you know, a unique perspective from the maintenance and the repair side of the business. and I can first off say that, whenever deceit or distrust enters an industry, especially a technical industry like business aviation maintenance, certainly the first thing that comes to mind is safety, and how safety can be compromised, how we can all be compromised by not really focusing certainly on the business at hand when other interests come in to play. And certainly, I think, when my company, for instance, deals with a Fortune 100 company as a customer, it isn't much of a consideration. Let's face it, every Fortune 100 company that we deal with in the United States certainly has a high ethical standard, and they have their own ethical statements supporting that behavior. I think when it was first highlighted was really with Foreign Corrupt Practices Act violations outside the U.S. Clearly, we have seen that within business aviation. There were publicized events with a handful of high-profile OEMs, manufacturers, and some maintenance service providers that were also in the U.S. And so I think that began sort of the concern that this was prevalent and could be possible in our industry. I, like Jay, would tell you that the vast majority of our industry is very, very clean and ethical in its standards and in its behaviors. But with the FCPA violations that we began to see and the questionable business practices that we began to encounter, I think it was paramount that our industry come together, that our associations support, show that our industry, in fact, is one that is run properly 99.9% of the time, and that we can't justify that 0.1% that certainly is outside of the bounds of ethical behavior, because there are so many ramifications within business aviation, let alone the professionalism and the trust with our customers, but certainly the safety at the end of the day. So, Jay, I hope that gives you some context, and Jad as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd just like to make one more point, and then if there are any questions, and that is that, from a transaction standpoint, I go out like my other aircraft sales professionals do every day to work hard to win our business, to articulate our fees, which I believe are, fair and value added. And then comes into our business and says, I'll do it for half the price, and I'll do all the same things that other guy says. And then, of course, at the end of the transaction, didn't deliver all the things that the established groups do, so that leaves the customer in their next transaction to say, God, I paid half as much as I would have. I didn't even get as much as I should have. I'm going to pay less the next time, or I'm going to do it without a broker. Same thing would happen in the MRO business. Same thing would happen in any other kind of service providing business. So it's incumbent upon us not to, again, be policemen, but just to continue to talk about this with our clients and make them aware, so the customer can say and mandate to their flight department or those people that are sourcing services for them, there are no referral fees allowed to be accepted here, no kickbacks allowed to be accepted, no side non-transparent transactions allowed to be entered into as long as you're working for my company. And it's the awareness of, at the top level, which will begin that dialogue down through the departments. And again, like I've said, they're rare, but it doesn't take many bad apples to spoil the bunch. So, Tom, are there any questions anybody would like to address or have answered?
The only question so far that has come in from the audience, and I texted it to you, Todd, while it was occurring. I don't know if you got it on your cell phone, but you were talking about that transaction that started with one manufacturer and then went to another manufacturer. And the comment, all it was a comment that it puts the seller in conflict with the RICO laws. That was the only. Oh, here we go. Here's some stuff coming for you, Todd. And we also sent it, are you confronted with aircraft brokers or salespeople requesting fee for bringing service clients to Duncan? For example, for a pre-purchase inspection.
Yeah, no, I think those are the kinds of examples. I think Jay also mentioned it could be you know when I say small, this may be an individual with a telephone and a mailbox at a hangar that we have been approached by, and I think you can shrug one or two of those off as lack of professionalism, sort of. But it becomes pretty obvious when we hear of that behavior going on elsewhere as well. In essence, them getting a reaction from some of the others that aren't in the industry, that certainly aren't as upstanding, smaller maintenance facilities. You also think of this as FBOs. Purchasing fuel at FBOs and getting special help or dispensation for your business. It could be also in other areas like, we talked about the charter business, it being prevalent or possible within the charter realms and the charter brokerage business that certainly goes on. And so, yeah, I would tell you that to your question, yeah, not the Fortune 100 companies, but the smaller, less professional, trying to do it on the side, trying not to be open with their and transparent with their communication, their contracts with their customers, and then again, their relationships with others in the industry. Thanks.
Todd, this is Tom again. I have kind of a follow-on question to that. Are you finding this becoming more and more prevalent where people are grinding nickels, thinking about price only as opposed to the value of what it is you're trying to sell them in terms of your service? Do you find it becoming more and more prevalent?
Yeah, and I think to a degree it has, and again, it's which segment of the market. We're really talking about the lower end segment of the market, typically. Now, the example that Jed gave was not that, but I will tell you that, yeah, based upon a whole value of an aircraft that may be worth, and I'm going to throw a wild number out, less than $1 million, you're certainly dealing with a different type of clientele. Switching gears, there's also the concern with some of these management companies that lack this professionalism. There are a number of new retail customers that enter our industry buying used aircraft. They may have chartered before. They're making their first purchase. Their first purchase may be a mid-sized aircraft, and oftentimes they reach out to management companies because of the complexity of operating those types of aircraft. So we do see, the utmost professionalism, I will tell you, in the larger, more sophisticated, more professional flight management companies. But this enters our industry sometimes one at a time. And as Jay said, it only takes one to really cast a negative on the industry, whether it be about safety, my operations, or my value of my dollar.
Got it.
Tom, real quick, Jed here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think you had one person ask, what happened with that big transaction that I brought up. Yeah, the second OEM ended up in a battled lawsuit between the two OEMs. Obviously, when that transaction got taken away, $50 million is a significant amount of money, and that turned into obviously a battle. But also to Tom's point, I also want to add, while we're talking about some of the negative things in our industry, there are some extraordinarily good companies out there that are doing the right things. Todd pointed out the larger management companies. I will tell you some of the bigger MRO facilities and the OEMs are trying very hard to do the right things and have a pretty regimented procedure for how to handle transactions honest and ethically and transparent. But we do have some players out there that are certainly casting a shadow on the industry, and that's what we're trying to address by basically shedding some light on an area that has been running in the shadows for a while and is starting to creep in on a more prevalent basis.
This is Tom again. How do you see this ethical code being used to actually stop, for lack of any other word, unethical people from continuing to be like the proverbial chihuahua who's biting at the ankles of the industry. How do you stop that?
You know, I'll take that on for a moment. This is Todd, and tell you that there are a number of tools and different ways that our industry, by raising the awareness, is going to affect this issue in a positive way. One of the examples, and I'll give, and I know Jed and Jay have others, so I'll let them chime in afterwards. But we got to, I'm maintenance business, got to visit one of our largest manufacturers in the industry is Honeywell. And I was down at Honeywell just last week, brought this issue up with them, and wasn't surprised to hear how supportive Honeywell is for this kind of behavior, and standing behind it with an affirmation of their support of business ethics. As we talked through this, they said, Honeywell, this is how we define much of our company, and we ensure that our 120,000 employees follow a code of ethics and a code of conduct. And he said, and this is so important, we recognize that Honeywell had a code of ethics with their vendors, but they did not with those that were their dealers within the industry. And so after a pretty short conversation, Honeywell is excited, actually, it sounds like a strange term to be excited, to move this to their dealer network and tie it to their 5-year dealer agreement. They're going to make this an addendum. They're going to ask their dealers to sign it separately. And so I think, this is the kind of, support that certainly, we need from large organizations like Honeywell that always do it right, that have to do it right. They're obliged to do it right, and now can affect others in their behavior potentially because of the dealer agreements that they affect. So that's one example, and I think, Jed, you had the others about the association involvement through the 3, 4, 5 main other associations. You mentioned that earlier. That's another great way that we're going to affect this. And Jay, you might speak to that as it relates to NARA too. Thanks.
Yeah, this is Jed, and so Todd, yeah, you've nailed it, and Tom, to answer your question, how do we feel this is going to help? It's going to help when a lot of the companies begin to follow the transactional statement and kind of post it. We are seeing now, and I've been told that at least 2 of the OEMs are starting to use the statement as an attachment to their sales contract, and saying, look, just so you, Mr. Customer, understand, this is how we expect to do this transaction, and we're going to follow the NBAA statement, ethical transaction statement, as part of that. And that's really what brings light to all of that. To Todd's point about the associations, we know that NBAA has a large membership, and this is where we started, and the NBAA Association obviously felt that this was a good place to start this dialogue within the industry. But certainly we hope that all the other associations, and by that I think they all are seriously looking at this and are very interested in crafting it. Again, it's open source, so they take the statement, they can, where we say NBAA, they might say Gamma, or where we say NBAA, they might say NATA or NARA, and we've given them the document so that they can modify it as they see fit. But the core of the statement and what it represents is going to go across all the parts of the industry, and that's really how I think you start to stem the tide of the bad actors that are doing it. Again, there's no policing, and there's nobody's gonna get thrown out of an association over this, at least not at the NBAA level. I can't speak to the other associations, but NBAA is not going to do that. They're not going to be put in that position. But I think it'll at least add pressure to people who are the bad actors out there. Jay, do you have things you can add on this?
No, I think you guys have done a beautiful job of touching on all the importance and all the points and all the key issues. And I think that those that are listening today know how to take this back and implement pieces of it or all of it into their own businesses or own business practices, create even better best practices. So I think this was a great opportunity, and Tom, I appreciate you allowing us to use this time so perfectly.
Anytime. Now, I have one strong suggestion. I think the NBAA or any other organization who is going to adopt these things should adopt the answer to the only question that people are going to use to attack this, and that is, how do I know you're not creating these codes of conduct as a way to keep me out of the business? To me, that's the only question that people are going to be able to try to cast in other people's mind to make light or to make smaller of the great works that you're trying to do with this. Telling people that there's no police for it or those kinds of things, that while those are all, because the truth always rings through, okay, but that should be adopted as there should be an industry answer for that actually puts the person asking that question where they have to take responsibility for what they're asking. So that's just my suggestion. This is Tom.
Tom, if I could jump in real quick, I think the piece of this statement that probably the litmus test for those people that would say this is, would you be okay if this were on the front page of the paper tomorrow? And if the answer is yes, absolutely. It doesn't matter whether you're new to the business, whether you're old to the business, whether you're big or you're small. If your actions can be published on the front page of paper, then I think come on in. And if they can't be, you answer that question for yourself.
Okay. And I think you've covered it. Is there, this is Tom again, to any of the three speakers, is there anything else that you feel needs to be added? And, I just got a comment. Person recommends that a webinar or seminar geared towards smaller operators, management, or sales companies. The success of smaller aviation companies is vital to the health of our industry, and it is difficult for them to compete with larger companies. Helping to educate smaller companies on an industry standards and best practices may help solve the issue. Nobody should feel the need to apologize to a client for charging for the services provided. They should be transparent and teach their clients what value they bring to the transaction. And secondarily, the message to drive home is that every aircraft owner, not the flight department, should demand 3 quotes. And personally, it says I might lose today, Jay, but ellipse ... But let's go back to the first thing. If there's anything that I can do, if I like the suggestion, I'll open it up to anybody who would like that kind of webinar to be done. I'll be glad to make my services on those available, and including if I have to travel to help do seminars at FBOs and airports. So it's up to you, Todd and Jay. What would you like to say to that long-winded thing?
Todd, go ahead. Well,
no,
Todd, if you're not there, I would just say that it doesn't matter whether you're big or you're small. You should certainly be proud when you put your fee statement on a table and be able to stand behind it because you know the value you're going to present. I do know that often you might feel that because you're not big, you can't compete. After 44 years, I don't know that that's a true statement. I think you compete with anybody, big or small, when you can look them in the eye, articulate your value, and deliver that value. Then you've created a customer for life, and it's sustainable. Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think those are great comments, and I was just going to add that the vast majority, the vast makeup of our AMAC, the Associate Member Advisory group that makes up most of the NBAA participation, serves most of our NBAA members are small companies, and I think this is of a particular interest to those that are smaller, that don't that maybe lack the professionalism because they just don't have that kind of support within their organization. That's where our associations are just vitally important to be that support for these smaller organizations. They do that with training today. They do it with examples like legislative, regulatory support, where we support at NBAA certainly the concerns of many, many small businesses within aviation. And so again, having NBAA and these other 3-4 key associations be our funnel, our conduit to any size business, any size customer, with underneath the association umbrella, I think can really be that kind of support that smaller organizations must have, and that's why you kind of join together and band together with these groups like NBAA. So hopefully, by our making this aware, bringing this awareness to the industry, it begins, and I think it has begun with many of the manufacturers and others to start to be, a real force within business aviation, and a recognition of those issues that we've had and how we're gonna solve them. So thanks for having me today.
I think we're about done. I don't see any more questions coming through. Again, anybody who's on this webinar, if you have a suggestion about a specific speaker or a webinar to handle the particular issues, please email Shay in my office. Oh, wait a minute. Here comes a question. It's Baron Thomas from Jet Fleet in Scottsdale. Success in this endeavor may come from making aircraft back practices. How do we get this message out? Well, I can tell you from my personal point of view that the problem as I see it is, if we had a way to get at people while they were thinking about buying an airplane before they buy it, that's the people that we need to contact. But until we figure out a way to know what people are thinking before the process, and if someone had that service, they'd be the most well-compensated person in this industry. Everybody has their own ways of gauging that from their ownership patterns or everything like that. But I don't know how to find a list of contacts or people that are getting ready or thinking about getting ready. And it's like anything else. The number one problem in this industry is obscurity, and that might sound funny, but it's true. It's making sure that the message continually gets out and is repeated and goes out and is repeated, whether it's social media, emails, your personal dealings with people. And that's, Baron, that's my answer to the question. Is there anybody else on the panel that would like us to take a stab at it?
Yeah,
well, I'll just give a quick answer. Oh, go ahead, Jed. Go ahead.
Sorry, Jay. I'll let you run. But I will say that watch the NA's Business Aviation Management Committee and our social media. We are putting a lot up about this ethics stuff, and we're going to continue to push it hard. We are also going to bring some content to base this year. I'm quite certain we're going to have some ethics work that's going to happen there as we begin to. What you're getting right now, and Tom, thank you again so much for letting me be a part of this. What you're doing here today is the very beginning stages of this, and we're going to continue to drive content and grow this. This is not a mature, by any stretch, this is not a mature statement, and it's not mature to the industry yet with the tools and best practices, but we are actively and aggressively building this, and we look forward to continuing to develop this as we move forward. Jay, your comments.
Well, just the last thing. Great question, Darren. I appreciate it. And I think there's several things that are occurring right now. People like myself are writing articles and writing blogs. People like myself and Tom, like yourself, there are touch points to these end users. The touch point might be their legal advisor, might be their tax advisor, might be their finance company. There are plenty of touch points. Could be their management company. Could be any number of people who get the first opportunity to talk to a prospective first entrant into our community. And that's where we're really trying to get the awareness. We may not get to that obscure user, but that end user is going to seek the counsel of somebody. And the more of these kinds of things we do and the more touch points we can touch, the more this is going to get out. And I think we're already seeing a groundswell. Just the idea that we're having this conversation today, or that NBAA created this statement, that's something different than ever happened before. So anyway, Tom, thank you for this. I appreciate it.
I have one last comment from Baron. He says, why not include a reference to this in our ads? We adhere to best practices and transparent dealings. And then the question follow on, are you demanding that from your vendors? I think that's probably not a bad idea in terms of having a logo that we can all put on our website, put on our contracts, just start using it to make people, what does that mean? So they can ask that question, and you could have a little link behind it on the, when it's on your website. They click on it and it would go to this, the statement that just everything, the more it's broadly disseminated, the better it is for the whole industry.
That is an outstanding idea, and I will take that on. What a great idea! Absolutely, I love that. Let me take that on from an association standpoint and see if we can't, somewhat brand that so that it can be used in that fashion. I will definitely look into that and see if we can't load that and get it built.
Thanks.
Awesome.
All right, everybody. I think we've had a great hour.
This is Tom. I agree with that. I think we've actually touched on a subject that when I started this whole webinar series, I never thought, it wasn't something that was in my mind, but I will stay in touch with you. And this is a message to anyone on this, including the presenters. If you have an idea that you feel that you want to speak about, that you need to go out to the entire industry, just contact me. My email is all over everything you've got, or Shay's email, and say, hey, I want to speak about this subject, and we'll get you in the schedule. This whole webinar series is designed for the aviation industry to communicate more among ourselves about what's going on and what we see as solutions, because we all just want everything to go better. So unless any of you, the presenters, have something else they'd like to say, and I'm going to stop talking in a second, I promise, this will be the end of what of today's presentation.
Great. And thank you, Shay, by the way. Hard work.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Shay.
All right, guys. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jed. Thank you, Todd. And sorry, Todd, sorry for keeping you on camera for so long, but at least you're famous now. Everybody knows what you look like.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Anytime. All right, we're signing off. Thank you. Thank you.